Hi everyone, thanks for joining us this afternoon for this REACH webinar. I just wanted to let you know that we'll be waiting maybe 30 seconds to a minute more for some more people to join us. So just sit tight and we'll get started soon. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. People can still continue to join, and that's fine. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon for this REACH webinar that is being put on by ARC Business Solutions, Inc. Just to let you know that we are recording this webinar and we will make the recording available to you afterwards. And also, if you do have any questions about this webinar or during the webinar itself, we do have a question panel and we'll be doing a Q&A towards the end. So once again, thank you for joining, and today we'll be talking about the future of employee training, gamification, mobile systems, and more. So Gopin, why don't we go ahead and introduce ourselves first?
Oh, sounds good. So my name is Gopin Kurup. I'm a director with ARC Business Solutions here in Edmonton, managing a number of accounts here. I'll be presenting the first part of this webinar and then handing it over to Sahil.
Thanks, Gopin. And hi, I'm Sahil Park. I am the content specialist with ARC Business Solutions. I help with a lot of the demos, the webinars, the product demonstrations for mobile solutions, and as well as onboarding and training for these products. And as Gopin said, I'll be taking you through the demo of the product. So yeah, really happy to be here and happy to show you what we have.
Good. Okay, so again, welcome everybody, and thank you for taking the time to join us for this webinar on learning and development and how this has evolved and why organizations need to consider new and innovative methods of engaging, training, and communicating with their employees, customers, and even other stakeholders. So to be very quick, our organization is ARC Business Solutions. We're an information technology company, full service, that was founded over 20 years ago. Our head office is in Edmonton. We have offices in Calgary, Toronto, Regina, and in the US. And we have clients across North America. And again, very quickly, what do we do? We do technology consulting, we do mobile app and software development, we do IT managed services, utilities consulting. One thing that's missing there is we also do quite a bit of enterprise information management, and yeah, we have rigorous talent recruitment and more. Okay, so basically, this, like Sahil said, is like, how is learning and development changing, and how has it evolved, and how can organizations take advantage of the new technologies and all that sort of thing. So research has shown that learning development market is growing explosively. There's quite a bit of stats around it, which we'll go into later. Digital learning is now the primary method of delivering content to both employees, customers, stakeholders. The biggest barrier in most cases is time. Like, how do you deliver the training and have your employees or whoever still be able to do their duties and deliver the training to them at the same time, or deliver knowledge to them at the same time? And the answer is basically using new technology systems to automate, gamify, and streamline systems. These technologies will allow learning to be provided as needed, engage the employee more, encourage social learning, and increase knowledge retention. And it makes learning a part of their everyday workday. In this webinar, you'll learn, again, how to tackle some of the most challenging parts of integrating technology into your training system. We use a specific product, but it's a concept more than anything else of a new way, innovative way to deliver training and learning and knowledge to your stakeholders and your employees. Okay, so research has shown that digital learning is now over a $240 billion market. That's over $1,200 per employee per year, and it grew by 7% this year. Other research shows that 87% of organizations are growing or flat, and only 13% are reducing their costs. So after 20 years of evolution from e-learning to blended learning to continuous learning to digital learning, today companies tell us that 59% are increasing spending on digital learning, and 39% are reducing instructor-led training. And the reason is because digital learning works. It gives people lots of online experiences, and choice really matters because up to 43% want self-directed programs, not being told by somebody else, that sort of thing. So professionally authored content is critical, but the opportunity to unlock internal expertise is massive. Data shows that 83% of learning and development managers now use internal content versus the 73% who use external content. And we learn in groups. 71% of Generation Z, 69% of millennials, 56% of Generation X, and 54% of baby boomers want more collaborative learning experiences rather than just doing it on their own and doing it in isolation. So basically, the best learning experiences force people to think, retrieve, and use the information whenever they need it. So yeah, when you're forced to revisit content time after time, it's much better because your retention, it's practice-based, it increases just the overall knowledge of the employee long-term. So the current challenges, one thing is, as I mentioned before, is time. So how do you give your people more time to learn? There are two things that you can do. Make sure you value your training organization and use technology to deliver that training. And make sure your company values learning. Give employees easy to use tools, make learning content easy to find, make sure that leaders value and reward people for learning, and start thinking about learning in the flow of work. Make it a part of everyday work and make it something interesting and fun for your employees. So this is where gamification comes in. So when it's combined with technology, it's a solution that can address a lot of the current challenges in learning development, especially when it's combined with various learning styles such as digital or mobile learning, simulation, or practice-based learning. So what is gamification? Its most basic definition is the use of game elements in non-game settings. It's gaming that has defined learning outcomes and objectives. And there's something called serious gaming, which is like hardcore learning. It's creating scenarios, it's creating empires, networks, all that sort of thing where you're based on your learning, you build a network and you're competing with other people. So the 4 different levels are achievements and challenges, entry-level game elements like points, badges, and leaderboards, rewards and unlocks of, let's say, secret doors or compartments based on the learning or the training that you've completed. Content gating, setting up prerequisites, having learners follow specific paths. So if you go down a certain path, you have to continue, otherwise you go back to a different level. In-game resources and currencies, such as little dollars that you basically use to get hints if you don't know the answer to a certain question, but it's currency. So as soon as you use it, you lose it. And so you have to basically really study, I guess, so that you don't have to use all your currency. And then there's actual game themes, stories, or engines based on simulations. These are the serious game elements, again, like we talked about. A simple example would be, like I said, build an empire. And you build the empire based on the training that you've done, the training you've passed, and results that have come out of it. So how do we get into this space? We In 2016, we built a serious game app for a hospital in Toronto called Baycrest Health Sciences. It's called SOS. It's an innovative multi-platform application for training nurses in long-term care at the hospital. It presents nurses with simulated elderly patient cases to assess and work through. Additional game elements such as points, leaderboards, and hints are used to keep learners engaged, but also aid in the learning process. Basically, the app proved to be very successful for Baycrest. Emergency transfers of elderly patients decreased by over 35% as a result of the app, and it continues to be used to this day with further enhancements. And this was the reason why they wanted to employ this app, was because they were sending people, the elderly patients, to emergency, which again results in more healthcare costs, and a lot of them were dying in emergency because it's a very stressful environment. So they found that a lot of the nurses were misdiagnosing certain symptoms, and it was a result of they just didn't know. And this new training module, or new way of delivering the training, engaged them more, and it was constant. It kept providing feedback. It kept providing more scenarios, that sort of thing, so that they can basically identify symptoms before, and then deal with them right within the hospital, rather than subjecting the patients to emergency care. And as final note, we won the 2018 TED Freeman Award for Innovation in Education for this app, because they found that it was just a really, really good way of training people. So how do we get into the ArcReach thing? It basically came out of the SOS system. It's the things we learned, the basic architecture, the basic gamification elements, all that sort of thing, it's very common. It can be used by any organization that needs to train or deliver knowledge or learning to their employees, stakeholders, customers. So we've developed our own application called ArcReach. It's a dynamic learning and communication solution designed to increase engagement and retention of knowledge. It simplifies the management of training progress. It gives rewards. On the back end, you can see who's been doing the training, who's been successful, who's been diligent, and you can reward people for that with the management dashboard. It shows the user success. It'll identify certain areas, such as, again, I'll go back to Baycrest, certain areas that everybody was failing and misdiagnosing, and they realized that, hey, we need to do some micro-training on this particular scenario, because our nurses aren't recognizing that this is something that's very common, and you don't need to send patients to emergency for it. So again, that sort of led to the result, 35% reduction in people being sent to emergency. Some of the features of our application: easy registration and onboarding processes, different levels of game elements and gamification to choose from, quiz-based, simulation-based, and team-based learning, communication features such as forums, push notifications, news feeds, and that's an important feature as well. Like training, again, modules can be just pushed out rather than having everybody coming to a boardroom or a training center or anything like that. It can just be constantly updated and reinforced. And its ability to support rich learning content with multimedia, documents, self-service management dashboard, hands control of the learning content to you, so that you, as the organization, you know the content, you have it somewhere, whether it's on your online training courses or classroom training courses. You can input that content into the application and create scenarios for yourself on your own industry. And there's also powerful analytics to give you an idea how your users are doing and where they're at in their training. So I guess in summary, the benefits are basically research proves that games are good learning platforms, especially in this day and age. There's different game elements to choose from to enhance different aspects of learning. So the end result is increase in knowledge, retention, and engagement of your employees, stakeholders, and customers. The learning content is always with the learners on their devices, whether it's mobile, it can be on their browsers, at their computers. There's improved communication at any time to directed audiences. Again, there like notifications and all that sort of thing. And you can modify your content easily to keep up with learners. So again, when you come up with new training modules, new information, new communication, it can just be pushed out using this application. So I think with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sahil to do the actual demo of the Reach application.
Thanks, Gopan. Just before I start that, we got a notification from one of the attendees that you might have to change your system settings to hear a little bit better. And I believe that's through the audio settings on the Zoom panel. So if you can't hear too well, just go through that and you should be able to bump up your audio a little bit. But now let's go ahead and turn over to the Reach demo. And so in this demo, I'll be showing you the actual user-facing app, as well as the administrative dashboard where you can go in and create everything that you'll see in the app version. And so let me just toggle over to that. And so this is what it looks like in a mobile frame. It actually is just the desktop version, and I put it in a mobile frame just to give you an idea what it looked like. And this is the login screen. Now this is just the login screen for our demo version of Reach. You'll see that we have many different iterations of the Reach app for different organizations, and sometimes they want to customize that a little bit. And so we're happy to do that, but this is what it would look like if you were just about to log in. So I'll go ahead and log in, and we'll get started. So this is the home screen of the Reach app. This is just the demo version of that. And what I'll take you through is all the different features, all the different buttons on this home screen here. I'll talk a little bit about the training and the communications features and how they're set up. And then finally, we'll move on to the dashboard or the back end. So once again, this is the home screen. You have a training section at the top here. This is where you have all of your different training modules and courses. Now these can be, as Gopan said, these can be quizzes or team objectives. They can even be scenarios. And I'll go into that a little bit later. Then you have your traditional account settings. You have a progress report section here that tells you how you're doing in terms of completing the training. You also have a newsfeed in the middle here. And this is where all of your news items come in. And this goes back to that communication piece that Gopan was talking about. Being able to send out a news item straight to all of your users in real time, and the fact that it shows up as a push notification on their mobile device, well, that can be really powerful because you can communicate really quickly with them, whether that be in the form of memos or updates, or even something simple as just letting them know that some new training is available. And that's what you see in the screen here. So that's your news feed. Then at the bottom, we have a forum section. So these are all of the discussion forums. Now these forums, they can go between users, but you can also message the administrators as well. So that's really handy for communication. There's also a document section. And so this is the section where you can upload any important documents you want your users to have on hand at all times. Things like community or company mandates. In this case, we have a critical nurse program PDF. And I mean, this is just a PDF, but you can also have Excel documents, Word documents, really anything you want your users to have with them at all time. And then finally, we have a leaderboard. I won't go into that now, but that's one of the gamification or game elements that you'll see as we go through the app. So let's dive into training. And once again, you'll see that there are 4 sort of high-level categories here. You can set up these categories of training as hierarchies, and then once you dive into them, you have your individual courses or learning modules. And so typically in Reach, we have 2 main learning modules. We have quizzes or questions, which is pretty straightforward. You have some sort of learning content, and then you have a series of questions based on that content. And then you also have scenarios. And the way I describe scenarios are they're almost like simulations of real world situations. Think, for example, in your job, if you've been in a tough situation and the decisions that you had to make in order to rectify that situation or to come out with the best possible outcome. Well, you're able to mimic those situations in the form of training modules. And that's what scenarios do in Reach. So what I'll do is I'll start off with a quiz. And as you can see, some of these quizzes and scenarios are related to healthcare. For example, we have a health and safety category, and we have some courses around that. And how about I take you into this course called WHMIS Training. Now, WHMIS stands for Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System. This is training it's mandatory for quite a few industries. You have to do this before you can actually work. And so I thought I would create a quiz around it. And this gives you an idea of how materials are set up in Reach. The first screen you see here has all of your training, your learning materials, and these can be in the form of text, images. You also have a video here. You can also attach documents and links. And the idea is that the user can consume this material, understand everything they need to know about, well, in this case, WHMIS training, and then they can start the quiz. So I'm going to go ahead and click Start. This will take me into the questions, and as you can see, there are two. And so the first question is a true or false. This one is about the safety data sheets, but soon there will be a material safety data sheet, and you have to choose whether this is true or false. I'm going to go ahead and click True, and we'll see how I do afterwards. And then we have a second question here about what does WHMIS stand for. And so you can see there are different types of questions that I've set up. There's a true or false. This one's a multiple choice. You can also set up short answer questions where you type in your answer. You could even have something like a file upload question where you actually have to upload your answer in the form of a file. So how about I go ahead and answer this, and I believe it's that one. And look, I got both of them correct. That's great. I can continue. I've passed this course, and you can see now it's checked off with a green check mark. So I've completed that course. I can move on to other things, but I can always come back and do it again if I need a refresher. And that's really key because the whole idea behind Reach is you want to reinforce the learning in bite-sized pieces. And that's why we have those small little courses that they can go into and complete, but always come back to. So the next thing I'll go to are scenarios. Now, if we go into scenarios, we have a bunch here, and one that I want to go into specifically is a patient scenario that's branching. Now, in Reach, you can have linear scenarios or you can have branching scenarios. Linear scenarios are basically one question after another related to the scenario itself. But we all know that in the real world, it's not that simple. And sometimes the decisions you make can send you down a completely different road from the one you intended on. And so that's why we also have branching scenarios that will take the user down a completely different path based on the decision they make. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So once again, we have some learning content here. You have some text. You also have a video about a patient that you can play in the app itself. And when you start, you have this story at the beginning about Mr. Smith. Now, this scenario is from the standpoint of a healthcare worker or a nurse, and they're looking after this patient, Mr. Smith. You have a little bit of information about the patient at the beginning. And once you get into the scenario, you see the first question is about what to do for Mr. Smith given this information. Would you A, administer acetaminophen, or B, review his history? Now, I would likely review his history because that seems like the right thing to do. And as you can see, that's correct. So as you go through this scenario, you're making decisions on behalf of this patient. And scenarios aren't just restricted to healthcare, of course. I mean, there are so many scenarios that you could find yourself in your day-to-day jobs, but this is just an example. Here's another great option, or feature I should say, in Reach is the ability to purchase hints to help you in the scenario. Now, we have it here written as request and assessment, and when you tap that, you have a list of hints that you can purchase. Now this ties in directly with the gamification, the game elements of Reach. If the user has earned some currency in this case from doing some other questions or scenarios, they can use that in this case to purchase hints. And hints are used to help the user make better decisions in the scenario itself. So if I had a coin, I could purchase the patient's relevant history, and maybe that would give me some information that could help me answer this question. So I'll go through this scenario a little bit quickly here, just to get to the end. And as you can see, I got one incorrect. Now, because I got one incorrect, I did not pass this course, but I can always go back and do it again, and it'll still have the same amount of rewards that I could get from completing this course, or scenario rather, successfully. And that's really important, is you don't want to discourage your users from doing these courses again, because that's the whole point of reinforcement, is being able to go through these situations over and over again to the point where it becomes second nature, where you don't really have to think too much about what you should do. You can just go ahead and do it. So that's scenarios, and that's the learning material. That's the extent of Reach at the moment. Now, I haven't gone through many of the gamification elements, but those are available in some of our other iterations. For example, this is the Baycrest app that we built, which I'll talk about in a second as a case study. And you can see this is much more gamified. There are many more colors. There are things like resources. There's a store to purchase resources. You have quests. You have an active leaderboard. And the point is that these game elements are built into the Reach app. So depending what you're looking for in terms of gamification, we can toggle these things on and off to suit your gamification needs. So that's the Reach app. I'll take you quickly through the dashboard, and then we'll get back to the webinar. So this is the dashboard. This is the brains behind the operation. This is where an administrator can go in and essentially create everything that you saw in the Reach app just now, from the learning materials to the news items to the different users and roles and so on. And so I'll take you through the high-level main categories of the dashboard. Obviously, learning management is a key one here. And this is where you can manage all of your different training materials in the app. So as you can see, the WHMIS Training course that I did, you can go in and edit that and set up new training materials. And we try to make this as straightforward as possible so that you're able to create these things rather quickly. You can add a title and a description. You choose the material type. Then you can add your learning content as you saw before, whether that be images, text, documents, links, or videos. And then you can create your exercises. So do you want to add questions? Do you want to create team objectives? Or do you want to create scenarios? And those are set up pretty easily as well. I mean, if we can go into one question here, you just type in your question. You can add your hints. You can choose your answer type. And then you can add your answer options here. So that's pretty straightforward. I'll take you to the scenario section, and I'll take you into the patient scenario that we did. Now, similarly, you set up your scenario like you did with the quiz, but what we also have is this question map that will allow you to map out your scenario and how it plays out. And this is really handy because if you have a linear scenario, you can move things around. If you have a branching scenario, you can see where things branch off, and you can click into it and edit things as you see fit. Again, we try to make this as straightforward as possible, and we actually offer training on how to use this dashboard too. So that's learning management. I'll take you to communications management. This is where you manage the forums and the interactions between you and the users, so you can go into your different discussion threads and answer them. You can manage your news items here. You can add new ones by giving it a name, an activation date, You can choose which audience this news item is sent out to. And then we have a pretty simple editor here, which allows you to add your news item content, as well as images and links, really anything you want to send out. And again, once this is sent out, it's sent out as a push notification to your users. Another thing we should talk about are roles. Now, this is a big part of Reach because you want to be able to send relevant content to the users that need it. And so you can set up different roles, and in this case we have physicians and nurses, and choose what kind of content goes out to them. And this goes beyond just healthcare roles. I mean, this can be for managers, directors, entry-level jobs, HR people as opposed to sales people. You can send out your content based on what's relevant to the different roles here. And then finally, the last thing I'll talk about are analytics. Now, analytics are really important because they give you an idea of how your learners are doing in the app. And so we have high-level domain analytics. We also have individual material analytics to give you an idea of how users are doing in each course. You can drill down into who has passed, who's failed, the last few attempts. And then we actually have individual user analytics too. And so you can go into a user, for example, me, and you can see how I've done with the training. And we understand that you probably want to export this data and integrate it with some of your other systems. And so we do offer that ability to export your data too. This exports as a simple Excel spreadsheet. You can bring it into something else and off you go. So that's the dashboard, that's the Reach app. I hope you got something out of that, and we're very happy, pretty happy with how far it's come in the past 2 years. So as I move back to the demo, there are 2 case studies that I wanted to outline in terms of using the Reach app. And the first one is Formations Inc. Now Formations Inc., they're a wood and building product supplier in Edmonton, and they have a sales and product training program for their salespeople. But this program required all of these salespeople to come together in a central location. They had to fly people in some occasions, and they had to hire someone to do this in-person training. And essentially this added it up in terms of costs. And also the salespeople had to miss work for this. And so they were looking for some decentralized solution to be able to present new products to their salespeople and train them on their own time. And so we used the Reach platform to build them a sales training app with a custom look and feel. And as a result, salespeople were able to train on their own time. These expensive classroom sessions didn't have to be scheduled anymore. They were able to save money. And on top of that, another big bonus was the company was able to use this as a communication tool with their customers and industry partners to communicate their brand and their company values, which is really important too. And the second and final case study that I'll talk about, the one that I showed you just now, is for Baycrest Health Sciences. We actually went back to them because they were looking to create a mobile game-based learning and communications app, but for their summer interns. And this was specifically, again, for long-term healthcare simulations. And once again, we used the Reach platform and helped to build, with a new interface, this serious gaming app. It had a pretty cool game theme and game story that we helped to create for them. And also, the Baycrest interns were able to use our dashboard to create and upload all of their learning content. So we actually didn't create any of the content for them. They created it all of themselves, which is a big plus. And as a result, they were more engaged, they saw an increase in the retention, and I believe we're running it again this year. So those are 2 case studies for you. We hope you got something out of those as well as the demo. We're really happy with the Reach app as it stands now in terms of learning, communication, and the gamification elements. We think it's a really versatile platform, as you can see, because it can be used in many different situations. And at this time, I think we'll take any questions that you may have.